Bench Opinions. 3 idiots with amateur analysis.
People take chunks.
Are we doing rugby?
Okay, welcome to Bench Opinions. Today we are going to be talking about rugby. So if you're looking for football, you missed it. That's probably because you haven't subscribed and hit the notification button, so please do that. But if you are here for rugby, hopefully you stick all the way to the end.
Yay!
And you give us a like.
You're probably an Ireland fan who came here from TikTok looking for more ammunition.
Yeah.
And it's your lucky day because this is the quarterfinal episode. No, I'm kidding.
Dom, listen.
Hey man, I didn't get involved in the comments, so I'm
didn't.
doing it now in person. You know, I'm fronting up.
Maybe to the ones who didn't see, we have a TikTok account on
which you can also like and
which
follow
you can
and
also
stuff.
follow.
Yeah.
And we post some short reels out of each episode. And last week we posted our reel on making fun of Ireland and what they had left to look forward to. And I think
it was all in tongue in cheek, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Ireland are a great rugby
Also,
team.
the edit was like
It was very clickbaity.
It made it worse.
Yeah. It was clickbaity.
Yeah, I still meant what I said,
Yeah.
but I didn't mean it all so quickly, like condensed. You know.
And we got lit up. Ireland, it was like kicking a wasp's nest. I think that thing stands at like over 120 comments now.
Nice.
And it ranges from people sort of understanding the humor, making some clapbacks, all the way to making fun of South Africa's electricity supply, making comments about the color of our skin and where they think we hail from in Europe.
Yeah.
And how we're gonna, and whether or not we're gonna be able to escape South Africa, or if we're gonna get visas to anywhere. So I took the approach of, on our official account, sort of interacting with a few that I thought were fun, bantering with a few. Klaus, on the other hand,
I took a different approach.
Klaus came for everyone.
The best form of defense is offense.
He started. There's a clear route throughout all of this. It started with sort of fun, like we're never going to take Zombie away from you. Then some of them really got under his skin with okay genius.
Yeah.
We also have the curry cup, which you misspelled. And
Tastes
then
good.
A lot of rage, a lot of anger, and then coming back to let's just all be friends. Let's all hold hands. We're both great rugby teams, and you've actually made a good friend on TikTok now. I don't know if you're going to meet up with him.
Might grab a Guinness.
Yeah.
No, it's all about taking people on a journey, and
It was exciting to see.
And I think what we achieved was a lot of engagement.
Yeah.
Whether that be positive or negative, we'll see if that has any influence at all.
I was very surprised that I was the least involved in all of that. That's usually my kind of thing.
Well, I said to Klaus, I asked him if he had played any online games or like been in that online world before in that regards, and he hasn't.
Nope.
Like,
All right.
it started back in the day. I used to play poker on Facebook.
Oh wow, I remember those days. Texas Hold'em.
Yeah. And like, I was like 14 years old, and you'd beat a guy and he would like light you up in the comments and be like, I fucked your mother, I'll fucking come over and kill your dog. And you're just sitting there going, right. Well,
I'm going to take this fake money I've just won and screw you.
so that sort of builds a little bit of an outer shell in terms of how to deal with that sort of online hate. And I mean, you guys saw me during the COVID days of playing Formula One, playing Call of Duty. The shit that people say to you there is also, it's just dumb. Online world is dumb.
But keep commenting.
Yeah.
We love to hear your opinions.
We're going to become a
I'm
clickbait podcast now, and we're
absolute
just going to
idiot.
say rude things about other teams.
Yeah.
Klaus, run us through what we're talking about today.
Let's get this back onto rugby. So the Six Nations tournament has come to an end, and the winners are France, which is what Dominic had predicted from the get-go. It wasn't the Grand Slam as he had hoped and predicted, but definitely a very dominant performance by them. However, there were two other teams that were in the running with Ireland and England, both of those teams also winning their final match. So had France not clinched it at the end, then one of those two teams could have taken it. For me personally, a very interesting tournament, a very entertaining tournament. How do you guys see it after seeing all the performances?
Yeah, I think the irony of it is it was so close. Even though I think someone like Scotland didn't live up to what I believe they can do. So that shows, imagine if Scotland had performed the way I think all of us kind of think, like better, you could have even had a closer tournament. So that's so brilliant. I think it's nice also to see, don't forget Italy's improved performance.
Yeah.
That's really nice to see. I think Wales is sad, but I think it is what it is. Let's see how they go next time around. But yeah, what an advertisement for the Six Nations. Yeah.
It's the Six Nations. I think it's one of the greatest tournaments.
It is considered the best tournament in rugby.
You can see why. Like, I mean, for the final weekend to be that close, not always like that, but to have three teams still in with a chance of winning, and to have, I think, the playing fields as even as they've been in a while amongst the top three is very cool to see. And for a Southern Hemisphere guy from South Africa, the Rugby Championship is always going to be the best. But even in that tournament, you are seeing more gulfs in class between New Zealand and South Africa and Australia and Argentina.
Right.
Especially Australia. Australia are like the Wales of the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, hopefully they make a comeback. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in their next tournament coming up, which would be the British and Irish Lions that they'll be hosting in, I think, middle of the year. France, as we said, ended up winning this tournament. Did the best team win?
Yes.
Yes, they did. In hindsight, they did. I thought I had predicted Ireland would win, and I did think they were the best, but France are better.
Yeah, I think we might still get to key moments in the tournament, but I think that English display against France, I think, is the only reason why there might still be any kind of doubt around the French team. I think France will be kicking themselves. I've said this before. I think Borthwick just maybe outfoxed them a little bit. The French also made a lot of weird changes in going into that game, etc., etc. Anyway, Borthwick did well. They got across the line. For a second, think about if France had beaten England as well, what we would be sitting here saying.
Yeah.
Because their performance against Ireland was so unbelievably strong. It was so good. Some question marks around some of the decisions against Scotland now and whatever, but that for me is the big thing. Is like, obviously we can work in what if, if no ifs, no buts, no coconuts, but that's the crazy thing to me. I think it's they were one loss away essentially from just completely cleaning up.
Yeah.
So there's two things about France that stand out for me. The one is their use of the bomb squad, or La Bomba, or whatever they want to call it. La Baguette. And the depth that they have in their squad. Is that, do you think, the deciding factor between them and a team like an Ireland, for example?
Did they win the last two under 23 World Cups?
Under 21?
Under 21? I think so.
Under 20.
Under 20, sorry.
Yeah. And I think that just shows what's coming.
Yeah,
and
they have the best. I think you can't argue with them having the best league in terms of quality in the world. I think if you look at their squad, I think, and again, this is, if you cut this into video, long live the Irish people that are going to comment on this video, but I think you're seeing a team on the up versus a team in Ireland that have to reinvent themselves.
I don't know if they do.
I think they do. I really think they do.
I honestly don't think. I think some of the comments, to be fair, were also like Ireland lost one game to France and suddenly the world has ended. I think the gap between the top four teams in the world, I'm taking England out of it for now, I'm going to include New Zealand and South Africa and Ireland and France, is who turns up on the day, what happens on the day. All four can beat each other on any given day. I think it's that close. I think if it gets into tournament mode, then who's the better tournament team? But I honestly don't think Ireland are far off it. I think they didn't have any massive convincing victories in this Six Nations, but they played without their head coach.
I think that's the one argument that I agree with, that they're not under Farrell at the moment, and fair play. And when I say reinvent themselves, I think there's just teams go through, I would say, regeneration at times, and I think that's the phase they're in now, and I think the manner in which they navigate that will be extremely important in how good they are, because I do think you're going to be seeing a starting lineup that's vastly different within the next 18 months.
Yeah. Well, there's a few guys leaving. If you're talking about reinventing yourself, I think one of the key things that they're going to have to look at is their number 10. And do they go with Prendergast? Because he, I think, did not have the world beater tournament that I think Ireland fans were hoping he would have.
Yeah.
And they definitely had some in reserve, albeit that was it Crowley who started on the weekend?
Jack Crowley, yeah.
Who kicks like Marnie Libok. Wouldn't have offered them that much hope, but if you want to replace someone like Johnny Sexton, who was iconic for them, yeah, that's going to take some time. And then, yeah, you're right. Then it's going to have to be a reinvention. But I honestly think they're going to be up there and contending. And I think for South Africa to go there in the November and autumn internationals is going to be fire.
Yeah.
The interesting thing with Ireland is that they've obviously got a very strong team in Leinster. And Leinster is performing extremely well in all tournaments that they take part in. You know, URC, not a single loss, the Champions
Even
Cup.
with the Irish stars gone.
Even with the Irish stars gone. So what's the difference between Leinster, where they source most of their players from, and then moving up that one step? Is Leinster doing something different in terms of rotating their squad a little bit more? Because Ireland hasn't done much rotation at all. They've brought in some new guys now, but they don't seem to change their team week in, week out.
Yeah, but their depth is not the same as someone like France and South Africa. Like Ireland is a small country. And
No, sure, and
as the people,
Yeah, but therein lies my skepticism as to how easy it is for them to plug holes.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, you have to look at the average age again is not something maybe that one has to talk about, but you need to look at key. Gibson Park is into his 30s. Bandiaki's well into his 30s. What's the old mate with the long hair that I can't stand? Left winger.
James Lowe,
well into his 30s. And the question is, how long do they maintain their level of performance?
do you know these things, or are you just saying that they're well into their 30s?
They're well in. I think Gibson Park's 32. Bandiaki's 33. I'm pretty sure that I looked through the age a couple weeks ago, and they are all in their 30s.
Okay.
And the question is
Because we've
now,
got to be right about these things, otherwise people are going to come for our throats.
yeah. Anyway, I will. While you guys chat about something else, I'll triple check these things. But what I'm saying is, the question is, how long do they maintain the level that they're at? And I think someone like Gibson Park for me is, if it weren't for Dupont, I say he's the best 9 in the world.
Yeah.
He's so good.
He is good.
And how long do they maintain that level of performance? And if that level of performance due to age, which is something that gets all of us, how quickly are they able to sort of blood new people and replace them to keep them at that level? And I think at the end of the day, this is actually a compliment to Ireland, because they play at high levels. And how do you maintain the own high level you set for yourself? That's the reality of it at the end of the day. Because I think if they're terrible, we're not sitting here talking about how they replace the guys that are in their starting lineup and such key players.
And that's my point when I'm talking about depth, because if the likes of Leinster are still able to perform at the levels that they are currently performing at without their stars, there must be players in those teams that they could also use. Sure. So it's going to be interesting for them moving forward. As Dominic says, there's a couple guys that are aging in a sense. So who are those new people that they're going to start rotating in and broaden out their squad? Let's talk about England. They actually finished second in
brief update.
Okay, here we go.
Jamison Gibson Park 33, Bandiaki 34, James Lowe 32.
Okay, into their 30s.
They're into their 30s.
Right. Now that we've got that cleared up. England finished second. Borthwick
Jesus,
secured his job or not secured his job?
Klaus,
we had a big chat about this at the beginning
if England finished third, it would be a success. So finishing second for them, I'm surprised they don't give Borthwick a knighthood.
Yeah, he should be knight. We should be calling him Sir Borthwick, to be honest.
Never going to happen.
According to Klaus's measurement of success, England are right up there. But jokes aside, they've done really well.
They have done really well, yes.
And you can think about Borthwick what you want, but they finished second in a tournament that I don't think they should have been close. I don't think they should have had a chance at the end, and all credit to them. I think,
and the only team to have beaten France.
Yeah.
the only thing about England is when you look at them and the news that's always around them, it still always seems like a mess. It's the whole Marcus Smith situation is never settled. Like where he plays, how he plays,
and they dance through this weird sort of thing of, on the one hand, saying this is the most talented group of England rugby players there's ever been, to that uproar about, oh, it's a mess and what is Borthwick doing, and that's why I keep coming back to that France and England game as such a key part of this tournament and key part in global rugby moving forward, because I think that game makes him keep his job, and that game makes English rugby have to stick with him.
Yeah.
And
there's no one else.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you could say
Warren
that.
Gatland.
But yeah, I mean, I heard that Peter de Villiers is also looking for a job. But anyway, I'd love him to coach England. Besides the point. But yeah, so I think that's why they have to stick with him now. They have to throw it behind him with all this talk about how talented this group is. Him finishing second with them in the.
They do have a good squad
in the thing. Yeah, and if he can find a way to keep winning games the way he has, then yeah.
Currently, their ranking is 5th in the world rankings. I don't think either of us really sort of give rankings any credit or any value. But I think is that quite an accurate description of where they are at?
I think they're the fifth best team in the world. Like I said, I think the top 4, I still maintain, are interchangeable.
Streaks ahead, yeah, as
but
well. With the best
I
of the
think
bunch.
England are 5th, and they could mix it with the other two on the day. But I think the noise around them still makes them a little bit of a...
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mentioned in one of the previous podcasts, it's just so crazy to me how it feels like the last time the All Blacks played a game of rugby.
Yeah.
It just in my head feels like forever ago.
And they had a good autumn. They actually had a good autumn series.
Yeah, and they had a good autumn series. So that's going to be so interesting coming into it now, particularly with almost the isolation of Super Rugby. I think obviously if you're into it, you're into it, but it does seem like it's isolated. It obviously is isolated from the rest of what World Rugby is doing at the moment. There's just so many unknowns.
Yeah. You don't know when they play France, they could be the same team that they were in the autumn, or they could be streaks ahead, light years better, have improved.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Could also be a completely new setup with different players. So it's going to be interesting to see who we get. Let's move over to Scotland, who finished 4th in the tournament. They only got 2 wins, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Is this a bit of a sad showing from a team that's supposedly in their golden generation?
So, I said maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, yes, that they underperformed, but then you have to put who they are and where they play in relation. That's a tiny country. They've got two unions in Edinburgh and Glasgow, and they're fighting against a France team that is as good as it's ever been. The best France team probably ever.
One of the best Irish teams ever,
that's ever been, and an England team that's packed full of stars and resurgent. So, the only thing that you can always expect is that that Scotland beat like an England, but this time they played at Twickenham, so that's probably not as likely. And then, like, key players of theirs are missing in some games and go off injured, then you're just like, okay. But then, I think you have to be a Scotland fan and just be happy with like those small victories here and there.
I agree with you. I think a large part is like aspirational by World Rugby fans and even Scottish fans. It's aspirational because of how likable they are. Yeah. I think as a country, we've been to Murrayfield a couple times now. It's hard not to like them, and there's this kind of atmosphere around Scottish rugby which is hard not to like. Something that I've criticized and saying maybe do they really lack maybe a bit of an edge and wanting to
there was the nice guys.
They're always the nice guys. And then I think too is just they have these players that kind of give you, they maybe put the wool over your eyes, like a Duan van der Merwe or a Darcy Graham or even Hugh Jones. These guys that probably get close to some of the other squads, on merit alone, but they put the wool over your eyes. And then if you start to unpick and you look at the level of guys within the squad. Yeah. Then you have to just be honest with yourself and be like, maybe it's aspirational.
There's a lot of critique coming from guys like For the Love of Rugby or like a Jim Hamilton, who from the Rugby Pod, who've been saying, yes, we probably don't have the depth or we most definitely don't have the depth that other countries will have. But if you compare Scotland to an island, and the how small their country is and how small Scotland is, that they should be able to at least do a little bit better than they've currently done. They've been putting a lot of pressure on the likes of a Townsend in terms of his coaching style, because you're just not going to have your big hefty guys in your front row like you do for France. So how do you utilize your back row, or your back line, who is very, very, very good?
I think the argument of population size when you're comparing Scotland and Ireland is unfortunately just a little bit short-sighted. And the reason I say this is because you have to look at everything. And we spoke about it in the football segment about, money and economically. The biggest sport in Scotland is still football. So that's the first thing. So I think that's one of the hurdles that Scotland has, And B, Ireland is, if you look at the economies of Ireland versus Scotland, private sector wise as well, they're just worlds apart. And I think that's where your financing comes from, and that's where the money comes from. And I just don't think Scotland has the financial means to develop and build systems the way Ireland have.
Yeah. Let's take what you were alluding to and go further. And let's say they do replace Townsend with, I don't know, there is a few club coaches in Europe that are really talented. So let's say they do find someone young and able. They still have to progress down the road that they've already gone down and try and naturalize a few players from over the world, because their player pool just isn't big enough. It's just not, if they want to continue developing. Otherwise, you can also say, listen, Scotland's going to produce some really good rugby players, but it's not going to be, you're not going to have 40 of them. You're going to have 20 of them, and you're going to have a good team. But if one or two of them are injured, then you're just not going to have a good time.
Sure. They're always going to struggle with their size. My issue is that I don't think the way that they are playing is conducive to the type of personnel that they have.
Do you think the Scots are putting Townsend under pressure, or is it people outside of Scotland putting him under pressure just because, like you guys said, everyone wants them to do well?
I've spoken with a mate who lives in Scotland. A mate of all of ours that lives in Scotland, and he says there is a bit of...
Who do you know that we don't know there?
He says there is a bit of chatter where people are getting a little bit frustrated.
Yeah.
He has been the coach since 2017, so he has had a good long run in it.
It's a long time.
And maybe it is just time to sort of try something new.
In the words of The Dark Knight, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
And on that note, let's move over to Italy.
Buongiorno!
Buongiorno! So Italy is playing with a lot of Chios.
Yeah.
The question is, have they improved from last year?
Do you know
Or
what
have
Italy
they gotten
remind me
worse
of?
from last year? Because last year, if you remember, they beat France.
Yeah.
They tied with France. They didn't beat them.
Italy remind me a lot of Argentina from 5-7 years ago. Just a lot of energy, some poor decision making. And if Italy follow the same trajectory as Argentina, then you could say that they're on the right path, because they're playing really good rugby. They have moments of genius, but then they also have these moments of like, you just can't ask yourself, why are players making those decisions? And it must be just because of an experience thing, and it's just they're not at that level yet. But they ran a few teams close this year. They probably didn't do as well as they did the previous years, but that is more, in my opinion, because the other teams are better than they were last year.
I think if the URC continues to grow from strength to strength, and whether the Irish want to admit this or not, the continued growth of that competition due to the South African teams coming in with their financial power and everything, Italy are the ones, I think even more so than the Welsh teams, that can really, really, really benefit off it. I think there's various factors to it. I think the first factor is Italy need to look at sort of talent pools maybe outside of their own as well, which has crept into their national side as well. There's a few guys, some ex-South African players, some Islanders as well in that side. I think Italy's quite an attractive place to go and play rugby.
Yeah.
Play your rugby if you're an Islander, or you looking to play your rugby outside of New Zealand, for example. There's been a few cases of that, and I think if they can embrace that and pivot to becoming the place that kind of breeds rugby outside of the traditional sort of hubs, I think they can benefit the most. I think Wales struggles with that a little bit more financially, but also because I don't know how many people want to go live in, like, wherever they go
Swansea.
live. You know, it's a bit tricky. And economically, I think Italy still has, particularly the north of Italy, has quite a lot of power and a lot of interest. And there's a lot of money in rugby in Italy still. It's very much a rich man's sport. So I think they will continue to grow. And I think any year they don't finish last in the Six Nations is a positive for now.
Right. And like seeing Benetton and the way that they're performing in the URC, the not just the national team, but the domestic teams as well are obviously on an upward trajectory. So there's a lot of potential there. If you're correct in what you're saying, I believe that if they can get their Latin passion under control a little bit, that maybe they can the pizza passion. Then maybe they'll stop throwing the.
Seems like we're going after the Italian fans this week,
Oh, we're actually being quite complimentary about the Italians,
but in a condescending way.
No, their passion just over exudes themselves sometimes. Then they can get that under a little bit of control, because those Hail Mary passes, the random offloads to try and keep a ball in play,
They have some superstars.
they've got absolute superstars.
Ooh, some athletes in that team.
Your likes of Menoncello, Capuozzo,
Ioane.
Brex, Ioane. Oh, right.
Ioane.
Ioane.
Buongiorno. Jesus, that joke's never going to get old.
There's some superstars in that team. So with a little bit of discipline, should be looking good. That brings us on to the last team and the final team. Bringing up the rear, Wales. Where are they at?
I don't think you can answer that question. Honestly, I think it's redundant, and I think they did well getting rid of Gatland. I think asking anything of the person who came in it was the guy from Cardiff, right? What's his name?
Yeah, he's, as an interim.
Can't remember what his name is.
Yeah.
I think they to a certain degree they did stop the bleeding. I think there was some moments of hope in there.
It's a pity, because you'd think from the week prior, you'd think, okay, there's definitely positive signs, and then England came to Cardiff and just ripped the barn doors off that place.
And I honestly think if you're Welsh Rugby, you've got to go, okay, let's just take a step away. Let's make sure our URC teams do as well as humanly possible, because they couple of them could sneak into those playoff spots,
right?
And try and grow the interest, or try and win back some faith amongst the Welsh players and fans that the union is in some sort of way in the right direction, so that you could look to build from the autumn internationals. I don't know who they're playing. I hope to God for them it's not New Zealand, but my assumption is they probably might play New Zealand.
Well, I think who was it? I think Knights posted that if they don't beat Japan in the end of year tour, I think they've got
22 games. I think unbeaten.
22 days.
I mean, beaten.
Games. Yeah, because then that'll snowball into like next Six Nations again.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to follow the route of someone like Man United. Just build a $2 billion circus tent and go on a 5-year journey of rebuilding.
Well, the interesting thing with Wales now is that at the end of the year we have the draw for the World Cup.
They might get given a wooden spoon there.
They might have to go through like playoffs to get into the World Cup in 2027.
I've said this for a while, is that I think they should schedule more winnable games for themselves, just to get monkeys off their back in terms of like when last have they won, building confidence again. Sure, you might end up losing to a team like Georgia because Georgia's not bad, but it's more realistic that you're going to beat Georgia, that you're going to beat Portugal, than it is that you're going to beat Ireland and France. So they're not going to have the chance this year because it's the Six Nations. That's the British and Irish Lions tour.
A lot of their players will be able to rest because not a lot of them are getting into that team.
I think only their scrum half has a chance, eh? Probably something Williams.
Jones.
With Wales underperforming the way that they did, and it's kind of unfair to ask this question because Italy have been the whipping boys for such a long time. Should promotion and relegation games be introduced, or does that take away from the history and the prestige?
I think it's not worth discussing because I don't think it's ever going to happen, because none of the teams in the Six Nations are ever going to let it happen because none of them want to get relegated.
But do you not think from World Rugby's perspective it becomes more interesting for them to
does World Rugby have anything to do with the tournaments themselves? They don't have voting rights in the Six Nations is its own entity.
But World Rugby is still involved in like all lawmaking stuff.
Yeah, but you can't make laws for tournaments if those tournaments are governed by themselves.
Sure, but World Rugby would still have influence, and they might not have a voting power, but they could still try and convince nations to get involved. And I think with the attempt of trying to bring second-tier teams up,
unfortunately, I think you have to follow the money here. I think that's one big hurdle. So I think World Rugby would have to come to the Six Nations and for some reason present a financial benefit to the Six Nations to now create a second. And I agree with the sentiment, because we've spoken about this on a day where you were not on the podcast. I agree with the sentiment that if you want to grow the global game, some of these structures have to be dismantled, or you have to promote I think that you have to start by promoting lower tournaments. I think you have to try and get people like Georgia even better. And I think the only way you make Georgia better is by everyone that's in their kind of...
Well, they had this tournament recently. I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, it was called the International Series or something. And to be honest, I think that's a step in the right direction. Is it enough? No, because all those guys are semi-professional. Yeah. They all have full-time jobs. And we've seen it. We've seen it with women's football, for example. People used to always criticize women's football for not being as good as the men's. And the argument was always, you can't compare amateurs to professionals. Yeah. And now women are full professionals and the game has come on leaps and bounds. Yeah. So I think that's the chicken and egg scenario with it. It's like, okay, well, if World Rugby finds a way to create a tournament at a lower level that drives the level of competition and then makes someone like Georgia knock on that door, because I don't know if you can argue that Georgia has knocked on the door enough. That's another argument for me. Is have Georgia done enough over the last 5 years other than getting better? They haven't beaten enough. And you could argue they haven't had enough chances, but I don't remember Georgia recording a shock result in a World Cup, for example, and beating anyone above them.
Portugal did. But I think it's, like I said, I wouldn't see why Italy would agree to, or Italy or Wales would agree to relegation, because the financial repercussions of getting relegated could kill the game in either of their countries.
Exactly.
It would be more in the sense that your England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and France would maybe push for something like that. If they have a team, let's say for the next 3 years, Wales just remain the whipping boys for the entire time. So then it starts ruining the product.
Well, as far as I've understood, it has to be unanimous for it to be decided. And also, it's not going to be honest, let's circle back to what we discussed at the beginning of this podcast. We're coming off probably one of the most exciting Six Nations there's ever been. And I think that's what strengthens the position of all those teams in that pool of 6 teams, saying, what's the problem? The interest is higher than ever. It's exciting than ever. Because then, to be fair, you'd have to have the same discussions about the Rugby Championship and whether Fiji deserve to get into that at the play.
True. I would say yes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the teams who run those competitions aren't going to agree to it because unfortunately the teams that are the whipping boys currently are hanging on from a union perspective for their lives. Because imagine if Wales Rugby wasn't going to get the financial injection that a Six Nations tournament would bring.
Yeah.
Rugby in Wales would die because they don't have the money.
I think the most realistic way of any sort of second string competition coming about, or the second sort of string of international teams knocking on the door of getting into what is known as sort of like the pool of main rugby nations, is Japan, Fiji, Georgia, all those teams that are kind of just a level below, trying to find someone like this United States, where the World Cup is taking place in 31, where a lot of money is coming into the game of rugby, and they're going to have to create a product that gives them the financial stability to keep growing the game.
Well, there you go. Interesting question. Food for thought. If you have any alternate perspective or views, please do comment in the.
Can't have anything. We're right.
But the Irish.
Oh, let's see what some Scotsman says about what we're saying.
I would put the question of how we save global rugby to the Irish fans.
Another bombshell. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and share it with your friends.
Thank you.